Welcome to session 123 of the Bible in a Year commentary. If you started this series on the 1st of January, then today should be the 3rd of May. Today we'll be looking at Isaiah 55 to 57 and Psalm 119 verses 129 to 152. But so far in Isaiah, we've read through the first half of Isaiah focused on the judgment and future hope of Jerusalem and the nations, and then the judgment on Israel's leaders for where they put their trust. Through these different preachers and visions, we've gathered a series of images. God was about to pour judgment on the Israelites for their wickedness and corruption. This punishment was described like God laying an axe to a tree and just a stump remaining. Out of the remnant of his people, this tree stump, God would raise up a branch from the lines of David and would be a king who reigned over the earth and brought peace. Focusing on the foreign nations, we got mention of a day of the Lord. On this day, God will bring judgment, waging war on evil and wickedness. He will destroy the powers that set themselves up against him, whether they be human, kings, or spiritual beings. The foreign nations are judged for their pride, oppression, and wickedness. Focusing on Israel's leaders, Isaiah pointed out that the judicial leaders, the priests, and even some of those who claimed to be prophets were proud drunkards, who put their trust in their own power and authority rather than in God. But through these preachers, Isaiah highlights some key ideas. The Israelites are not to turn to these foreign nations for support and protection. God is in control, and he will use all of this for his purposes. Eventually, even these foreign nations will be brought into God's future kingdom. In that time, all people will celebrate, feast, and worship God, led by a king who will bring peace and flourishing. Then we started the second half of Isaiah, written to the people after the exile, giving them a new hope. It was God that led the other nations to do what they did, not those nations' own strength or their own gods. God was always in control and will lead his people to flourish again. As God leads the foreign nations against each other, ultimately he will still see all nations brought under his authority and worshipping him. We got the introduction of someone God calls my servant, saying, I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. That's Isaiah 42 verse 1. The servant will be despised by Israel and suffer to the point of death. But the servant is to be a covenant to God's people, an offering for their sin to bring them into salvation. The servant is contrasted with Israel, who is described as a blind servant because they continue to reject God. We got imagery of God divorcing Israel, but will one day restore them to himself. God will send one ahead of him to his people, declaring good news of their salvation. But let's jump in with today's reading, Isaiah 55 to 57. God is now making an open call, an open invitation to enjoy a relationship with him. He promises to make an everlasting covenant with anyone who is thirsty or hungry. This call goes well beyond the people of Jerusalem, to the nations, to anyone who may come. He invites the people to seek him and turn away from their sin, because he is willing to forgive them. Just as rain comes and waters the ground and brings life to the earth, so God's word brings life to those who hear them. The overarching message of this last couple of chapters has been that God is going to pour blessing on his people, so they will sing with joy, expand their tents to feel all his blessing, and no longer fear, that in return they may listen to God, seek him, and turn away from their sin towards him. This brings us to the last section of the book. Each of these sections has picked up and used the same themes, but have had different focuses. This last section focuses on God's plan for the future, to offer his salvation, to transform his people, and to finally destroy the wickedness once and for all. God starts by outlining what's expected to receive salvation: keep justice, do righteousness, keep the Sabbath as holy, and keep away from doing evil. He then opens up and says that no one who does these things will be kept from his salvation. It doesn't matter if you're not an Israelite, if you're a foreigner, and it doesn't matter if society thinks you're lesser, such as a eunuch. If you're obedient to what God asks, you get to be part of this family, be one of his sons and daughters, and live in his house. Just as he has gathered the broken of Israel back together, so will God bring all people together in him. In contrast, God begins to reject those who have not been obedient to him or followed his ways. He first attacks Israel's unfaithful leaders. He calls them watchmen and likens them to lazy dogs that gorge themselves, to shepherds that don't know what they're doing, and to drunkards. Next, he challenges the sons of the sorceress. That's Isaiah 57 verse 3. These are those that have chased after demon worship or the worship of other gods. He says how they are the result of adultery and then challenges them for causing his people to commit adultery against him. Because of them, the people have gone to smooth stones, standing stones that were places of worship to other gods, and made them offerings. Or to the mountains, where there were altars to different gods so they could make sacrifices to them there. Their worship of these other gods was as bad as leading a lover into their bed and having an affair with them. So God challenges them, saying that he has held his peace with them for long enough, and if this is what they want, then they can look to their idols to save them next time they're in trouble. But those who take refuge in God will be able to come close to him. God will deal with those who are humble. Even if those who are humble fail greatly in the past, God will still heal them and restore them and lead them. He will bring them peace, but there will be no peace for those who continue down this wicked path. That's Isaiah 55 to 57. Now let's look at Psalm 119 verses 129 to 152. We're continuing on with Psalm 119. This psalm isn't attributed to anyone in particular and falls into the category of wisdom psalm. Each stanza has 8 verses each, and each verse within a stanza starts with the same letter of the Hebrew alphabet. With 22 stanzas, we have a different stanza for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In many ways, this psalm can be seen as the ABCs of biblical wisdom. Here is a summary of the structure, but I would recommend checking out the written version of this commentary in the description to see the structure properly for yourself. But we have verses 129 to 136, pay. Your testimonies are wonderful, therefore my soul keeps them. Verses 137 to 144, sade. Righteous are you, O Lord, and right are your rules. And then verses 145 to 152, kuf. Where my whole heart I cry, answer me, O Lord. Stanza 17, verses 129 to 136, praises God for his decrees, and as the psalmist once again committing themselves to them. The decrees of the Lord are wonderful, they give light and impart understanding. Because of this, the psalmist thirsts for more of the Lord's decrees and to understand them better. The psalmist appeals to the Lord to be gracious, as is his custom, to guide the psalmist's steps and redeem them when others seek to oppress them. May the Lord help them understand his commands, because it grieves the psalmist when they're not kept. In stanza 18, verses 137 to 144, the Lord's teachings are a reflection of his righteousness. As a God of righteousness and justice, the Lord has made decrees that promote righteousness and justice. The psalmist is then zealous of the Lord's decrees to be upheld because the alternative is injustice. The psalmist holds on to them because they know that living according to them will promote righteousness forever. Then, in stanza 19, verses 145 to 152, again the psalmist is struggling. The psalmist holds tightly to the Lord's decrees, but their enemies do not. They are far from God's law and intend evil. They persecute the psalmist. But despite all of this, the psalmist holds even tighter to the Lord's decrees, and the Lord draws near to the psalmist. Thanks for joining us today. Take a moment to reflect on what you've read and share your thoughts or questions below. If you're watching in the future, then you can click here for the next session, or you can find the full playlist just down here. To receive these daily commentaries in your email inbox, subscribe via the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.